Extra details on the Peugeot 306 come from Jeremy on 0891 447747. And for more information on this weekend's Pirelli International Rally and to enter our rally competition, call the hotline on 0891 333 404. And a reminder that the Classic Car competition is on 0891 800 350.
1990, and the World Snooker Championship fell to Stephen Hendry. 1991, and the honours went to John Parrott. 1992, and Stephen Hendry triumphed again. Who'll pocket the World Championship this year? Coverage commences in tomorrow's grandstand, continuing at 4:30 on BBC2.
Now this evening's film on BBC2 with a long list of top British actors turning their talents to the haulage business. Hell Drivers.
Tonight's late movie finishes our short On the Run season. Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek are young lovers travelling across South Dakota, leaving a trail of death and destruction. Badlands, later at 11:20.
Get set for summer with BBC Sports.
And before we launch into that summer of sport, in fact in an hour and a quarter, we spring into action for coverage of the women's finals in the World Gymnastics Championships. That's later at 8:30. Well, now on BBC2, that's a more relaxing pastime of tending the garden.
This week,
Well, Linda Brown offers hints and tips regarding the best vegetables to grow in small gardens in the May issue of BBC Gardener's World magazine. Holby General is counting the cost of healthcare. But what price do you pay for life? Tough decisions on BBC One in about 15 minutes.
Now, we've all heard that pub quiz question. What do the team from Have I Got News For You do during their spring break? Well, Angus Deaton worked as a professional dancer. Yes, he's lifted his legs for money. Paul Merton was doing a show in Brighton, described by Dolphin Weekly as... And Ian Hislop doesn't look as out of place in this picture as you might expect him to. Still, they'll all be back with a brand new series of Have I Got News For You tonight, 10 o'clock on BBC2.
In 15 minutes, Public Eye focuses on Britain's first private prison for sentenced men and reveals disturbing facts about the American company chosen to run it. First on BBC2, a look back at the week's events as reported by the tabloids and the broadsheets.
This week, What the Papers Say is presented by Mark Lawson of The Independent.
Hello. An always popular newspaper feature is the Where Are They Now item, in which a forgotten celebrity is tracked down, generally living in a caravan in Morecambe, with a few sad trinkets from their period in the public eye. The news pages, though, frequently contain an unofficial version of such stories. For example, many might have wondered where Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, a 1980s Conservative politician, is now. On Wednesday, they found out. She was in orbit.
Thatcher blasts.
Accomplice to massacre.
Major.
And the Daily Mail explained.
Baroness Thatcher last night unleashed a devastating attack on John Major's policy towards Bosnia.
The former Prime Minister's attack on her successor made most of the front pages, but the response to her comments was an interesting commentary on the attitude towards her now of those papers which made and sustained her. The Daily Mail, whose editor-in-chief, Sir David English, she knighted, gave her a lot of space, but also kept a lot of space between itself and her.
Would her whole strategy now not run the risk of compounding the horror rather than abridging it? As a performance by a past Prime Minister, last night's by Lady Thatcher was magnificent. But today's Prime Minister would be failing in his duty if he did not ask himself those questions which she scorned.
The Tory press is currently at best uncertain in its support for John Major, and ministers violently rejected Lady Thatcher's advice.
Malcolm Rifkin, the Defence Secretary, dismissed her remarks as
emotional nonsense.
So you might have expected the press to stoke up a good old inter-party row. But intriguingly, although the Tory papers might be seeking something to beat Mr Major with, they were not keen to use the old stick. The Telegraph, Times and Sun did not feel Lady Thatcher's intervention to be worth an editorial. By Thursday, though, something strange had occurred, dismissed by most senior politicians and journalists as battlely out of touch, refighting old battles, and specifically the Falklands. Lady Thatcher was shown to have antennae still connecting to gut British reflexes. A Gallup poll for the Telegraph found
61% would back use of force to end war.
There is widespread support among the general public for Lady Thatcher's views on the Bosnian conflict.
Once, the Tory press would have had no difficulty in falling behind a cause which had the backing of both Lady Thatcher and the general public. But Thursday's Mail conspicuously chose merely to dramatise the divisions.
Is Bosnia a war worth fighting?
The case for crocodile tears must give way to action, by Winston Churchill, Tory MP for Davy Hume.
The case against revulsion is right, intervention is not, by Lord Jakobowicz, former Chief Rabbi.
This was clever casting by the Mail, as Lady Thatcher's original remarks had invoked both the first Winston Churchill and the Jewish Holocaust. Equally unsure, The Independent made random raids on the telephone directory in search of views about what to do.
Kingsley Amis,
novelist.
My best solution would be never to have gone there in the first place.
Sir Roy Strong.
Gardener.
I keep thinking, why the hell did we get rid of the Austro-Hungarian Empire?
Dame Barbara Cartland.
Novelist, octogenarian.
We should send in aeroplanes. After all, we no longer have enough soldiers since the reforms under Thatcher.
Another old newspaper page filler was back on parade last week. Whatever happened to Captain Robert Maxwell MC? Or more to the point, what happened to him? Doubt was first floated as soon as the publisher died in late 1991.
Maxwell mystery.
Did he fall? Did he jump?
The Mirror, then still owned by the Maxwell family, insisted
Maxwell, it was natural causes.
But by early 1992, the consensus was death by his own hand.
Maxwell report points to suicide.
Investigators detail strange last hours and say Tycoon ordered farewell flypast.
Sadly for the British conspiracy theorist, this country has never had a great national mystery of its own, having to make do with American ones like the deaths of John F. Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe. But Maxwell's fall shows every sign of becoming our first great homegrown poser. And the April edition of the magazine Business Age this week stirred the waters again.
World exclusive.
How and why Robert Maxwell was murdered.
On a trail that has taken him from Dublin to Israel, to New York and to Montreal, Kevin Cahill reveals the full story of his death for the first time in a world exclusive.
Working with a character like Maxwell, who had gone to the last audit, Business Age may have felt free to speculate, but its piece is a splashy and entertaining read, Cahill claims.
On the 2nd of November 1991, 3 days before Robert Maxwell's body was found in the sea off the Canary Islands, a source close to the Israeli cabinet told American Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Seymour Hersh that Maxwell was about to be eliminated.
The piece employs a style familiar from the Kennedy assassination canon, a combination of allegations about safely dead men and claims about secret services, two kinds of bodies which for different reasons never speak. For example, Cahill suggested about Maxwell that
the seeds of his downfall had been sown that night in 1984 when he handed Reed International Chief Executive Alex Jarrett a draft for £84 million to buy the Daily Mirror. He didn't have the money, and it had all come from Israeli sources.
So, according to Business Age, had its own story. The information came from or from near to
Israeli dissidents, the names of which are known to Business Age, but withheld for legal reasons.
Investigative journalists like to complain about the restrictions of the law, but in fact such indications of what it has been necessary to omit have the function in print journalism of the throbbing soundtrack in a thriller movie. Those Israeli dissidents,
the names of which are known to Business Age, but withheld for legal reasons,
had apparently then gone
to Catania in Sicily to hire 2 mafia-connected contract killers. The 2 men...
Go on, tell us who the killers were.
The names of which are known to Business Age, but withheld for legal reasons, had done killings for Mossad before and were well known to the dissident officers.
Getting the Mossad and the Mafia in the same story is the investigative journalist's equivalent of the gambler's 3 lemons in a line at Las Vegas. Anyway, the Sicilians in the pay of Israel reportedly had 3 plans.
The first was a plan to sabotage his helicopter, easily made to look like an accident.
The second was to arrange the lift doors to open at his Mirror Group headquarters without the lift there and push him down the shaft.
A threat to businessmen, which I suppose gives a new twist to that American insult. His elevator doesn't go all the way to the top. And the third option?
Was to intercept his yacht at sea and stage a drowning-type accident.
Good Lord. And if I remember correctly, Maxwell was on his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine, shortly before he died. This, according to Business Age, is what happened.
The killers slipped over the side of the dinghy in wetsuits. Both were big men, specially chosen for the task.
Well, so you might hope. I mean, it would be a bit odd if Mossad just left a poster on the notice board saying, anyone interested in murdering large yachtsmen, please sign here. These 2 specially chosen big Sicilians in wetsuits
entered the Lady Ghislaine by the stern ladder. Maxwell had his back to them. There were no screams, but he laughed as he fell back. The second assailant landed a blow to the side of his head.
But surely the autopsy...
The military cosh is designed to leave minimal marking.
Ah.
This giant man was finally immobilized and at the mercy of his killers. The second assassin knelt down, removed the syringe from its case and injected a bubble of air into Maxwell's neck. This air bubble would quickly travel to his heart and kill him, giving the effect of a heart attack.
So it must have been jolly annoying to the specially chosen Sicilians in wetsuits that in fact everyone said.
Suicide.
Maxwell watchers must make of the Business Age story what they will. However, conspiracy theorists may be interested in a bizarre new twist to the tale, which an extensive What the Papers Say investigation on a trail which has taken us from Manchester to London can reveal. On Tuesday, November the 12th, 1991, less than a week after Maxwell's death, The Sun reported,
Dad was killed by air jab.
Says Maxwell's daughter.
Tycoon Robert Maxwell was murdered by an assassin with an injection of compressed air, his daughter Christine claimed yesterday.
Spooky, as Dame Edna Everidge would say. Even spookier was today's Daily Telegraph headline.
Race to bring Captain Bob to life.
But don't worry, this was showbiz rather than science.
As if the original Robert Maxwell were not enough, ITV and BBC are battling to bring us rival versions of his life and death.
The producer of the ITV version promised,
We'll tell his story as entertainingly and in as much detail as you can squash into 2 hours.
But according to the Telegraph,
The BBC, on the other hand, believes that 2 hours is far too short to tell the whole incredible story.
oh, why? The producer explained.
We will show Maxwell examining the principles by which he has lived.
And they think 2 hours is too short for that? It's a slow-motion drama, is it? But not all of the characters in the press last week were familiar ones. Wednesday's papers, small and large, were united in the space they gave to Jacques Attali. Wednesday's Sun reported that he had been
described as a
pain in the butt
by one American critic. Other detractors regularly use words like
arrogant,
opinionated,
and domineering.
All the proper qualifications for a newspaper star character, at least if Robert Maxwell and Margaret Thatcher are any guide. But according to the Sun's sister paper, The Times, Monsieur Attali brought new qualities of his own.
An owlish-looking polymath, author and intellectual gadfly.
This exotic character runs a bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He was in the news because, as Wednesday's Guardian explained,
members of Parliament are to investigate how government money was used by the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development after claims that it spent £200 million on setting itself up, twice what it had disbursed in loans to help rebuild former Iron Curtain countries.
The bank's startup costs started up a chorus of indignation.
It's a marvellous waste of money.
Even loos are lavish.
In the splendour of the Eurobank's new London headquarters, even the toilets have marble floors.
But whereas any old marble would do for the lavatories, the bank was choosier about what went elsewhere. According to The Sun, the bank had
ripped out a splendid new marble foyer and spent £750,000 replacing it with stone from Tuscany.
It had also
spent £1 million on private jets for bank chief Jacques Attali, former advisor to socialist French President François Mitterrand.
That last line is a clue to the story's popularity. In an ideal world, the bank boss would have been German, and the tabloids could have called him Attali the Hun. But he was at least French and a socialist. This gave the newspapers an opportunity for chacun à son goût, each to their own. The Star was able to use the story as more anti-Europe fuel.
Europrats!
While the presence on the list of governors of one N. Lamont Esquire, because of the government money involved, allowed another shot at a favourite target.
He's lost his marbles.
Lamont blasted as bank squanders your £40 million.
The story has something for everyone, and so everyone had something. Indeed, in one of those amusing newspaper coincidences, two of them had the same thing. The Telegraph headline on Wednesday was,
"The bank that says yes to itself."
while the Daily Mail headline was,
The bank that says yes to itself.
in fact, this was a more significant coincidence than it at first appears. While we're talking bank puns, most of Wednesday's reports on the Attali affair might be attributed to the listening newspapers. What they had listened to was Tuesday's Financial Times, which had carried a fascinating report under the headline.
The bank that likes to say yes to itself.
But it was not only the headline, which was to find a matching fund of invention the following day. Virtually all of Wednesday's stories were carved from the FT material, right down to that marble. The FT reported that
Travertine marble, similar to that installed in other neighbouring buildings in the Broadgate complex,
had subsequently been
removed and replaced with some hewn slabs of very high-quality statuary marble, specially imported from Forte de Marmi. It cost £750,000.
often accused of having lost their marbles. The tabloids had on this occasion only borrowed them. This fact is worth mentioning because newspapers and even some broadsheet titles tend to regard the Financial Times as playing Ingmar Bergman to their Steven Spielberg. But with the FT already having performed well and originally on the BCCI and Matrix Churchill stories, Attali and the Marble was another example of its liveliness. FT increasingly seems to stand for Filch Tomorrow. The day after its Attali story, the Times was using the giveaway phrase of newspapers scooped on a story.
Revelations of lavish spending on the headquarters of the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development in London have come as no surprise.
A second new character was introduced to the tabloid soap opera this week, and probably with less justification than Mr. Attali. Gardens have always made a good yarn, from the Book of Genesis to Lady Chatterley's lover, and on Wednesday another green-fingered type was fingered. The Sun reported,
Archer's little petal. Best-selling author Geoffrey Archer and his wife last night revealed a secret at the bottom of their garden.
oh dear. Readers were presumably supposed to reflect on what, in domestic mythology, traditionally lives at the bottom of gardens. But the Sun's prurience was, this time, very slightly more unusual.
The man who has looked after their lawns and flower beds for 8 years is now a woman after a sex change operation.
I'm not going to mention the gardeners' before and after names, although many papers did. The Independent's diary joined in the sniggering.
Lady Archer does not want this story to appear, but as a paper of record, we would like to point out that Geoffrey and Mary Archer's gardener...
And the Telegraph also peeped through the shrubbery, regarding what it saw as worth a news story.
Gardener has sex change.
The newspaper industry's code of conduct promises
Intrusions and inquiries into an individual's private life without his or her consent are not generally acceptable.
It was clear that the gardener did not seek publicity, and that nor, for once, did Lord Archer, whose forced public statement was unusually mature. The gardener had, he said,
discussed her gender refinement with my wife and me nearly a year ago, and we are fully supportive of the course of action she has taken.
So Lord Archer unexpectedly came up smelling of roses, but the press looked soiled. The code of conduct suggested that the rough, tough newspaper boys would be transformed into blushing, sensitive girls. But judging from the treatment of the Archer's gardener, the operation hasn't worked. Goodbye.
Hey, big spender! Hey, big spender! Hey, big spender! Spend a little time with me.
Once upon a time, there was a boy named Buddy and a girl named
Peggy Sue, Peggy Sue, pretty Peggy Sue, oh Peggy.
Famously, Buddy died in a tragic accident. But whatever happened to Peggy Sue?
Oh, well, I love you, gal.
When you have a plumbing problem, we're here for you. Rapid Rooter.
The real-life rock and roll tale of Peggy Sue. Tomorrow at 5 to 9 on BBC2.
The latest series of the hospital drama Casualty returns to BBC One now. Well, here on BBC Two in half an hour...